Hello friends, you're with the Lonesome Gamer, and today I'm gonna play Mr. President by Gene Billingsley. I think he is the G of GMT games, but I'm not absolutely sure. So this is a beautiful box art, I think, and it's a large box. There's a lot of stuff in there. And I say we just set up the game. That will take me quite a while. This game has a huge setup, and it has also a pretty large footprint. So for you, I'm gonna be back in about a second, but the setup will take me, I think, at least an hour. Okay, so the setup is nearly complete. And you can already see this incredibly large board, and there's more stuff over here. So the footprint of this is massive. I'm gonna get through all over the board in a few minutes. But before we start, actually, with that, I wanna pick the attributes of the president, and also I want to get my key cabinet officials. So we have here the president's attributes, and we're going to draw 3 of these markers. Now, most of them are positive, like these, but a few, like these, are negative markers. The red ones are negative. Now, I'm going to draw, because I'm playing on easy mode, I'm only going to take the positive markers. So let's see what we get. Okay, that's already a negative one, so we don't take this one. There we go. We're business friendly. So that's a +1, I guess, improvement on the economy each turn. Nice. So then we have, we are respected by Congress. That is a +1 relations with Congress per turn. And the last one is military, +1 to strategic capabilities per turn. Okay. So there we go. And now we gotta do our cabinet. So this is a possible cabinet member, and you can see there's his name. Then in this white line down at the bottom, you have 3 numbers. Now the first one is his domestic ability, the second one is his diplomatic ability, and the last one his military. And the worst is 1, the worst is 0, then you got 1, and the maximum possible is 2. There is a backside where these guys then can improve. And another positive ability is if they have a +1 action, like this guy does. But okay, so now we're gonna draw our vice president, and this guy is also completely random. So we simply hope that we have a good one and not some kind of loser here. And this guy is okay, it seems. Barry Wallace. Not super exciting, but kind of, he's not that great actually. But he's not terrible, at least. It would be great if he had an additional action, but okay. Now we go with the Chief of Staff. And what's interesting here is that now we can draw 3 counters and we choose one of them, and the other two go back into the cup, and we want one who has a good domestic value. Now, this guy has a 0 and a +1 action, which would be good. This guy has a 1, but this guy, Rick Campbell, he's got a 1, 0, 1 and a +1 action. So that's pretty awesome. And because the Chief of Staff will mostly do domestic actions, we want him to have a good domestic value. So a 1 is okay here. Now we continue with the Secretary of State, and we do the same thing again. And this time we want a good diplomatic value. And this is not good. Oh, fuck, man. Okay. So we got Bill Hansen, 001, Alan Price, 100, and Andy Lewis, 000. Now what's fun about Andy Lewis is there is actually a second Andy Lewis. And he is the Superman of the team. He's got a 222 if I'm not mistaken. Just have to find him. I'm not sure where he actually is. Is he there? Oh, is it this one? Yeah, it's this guy. So at the start he's got a 111 and a +1 action, and then he improves to a 222. But so there's one strong guy and one bad guy, and we've drawn the bad guy, which means the good guy is now removed from the game. So whoever you draw first, that's the one who stays in the game, and the other one goes away. So sadly we sit here with a loser. I think I'm gonna go with Bill Hansen. Yeah. Well, I mean, I could. Alan Price gets an additional action. That might be worth something. You know, I'm actually gonna go with Alan Price. For now, I think eventually I might actually remove her from my cabinet. It is possible that you can appoint new cabinet members. So, and then at the end we got our Secretary of Defense, and that is, we want someone with a good military value. This guy is already not bad. Yeah, okay. So we can choose between Raul Sanchez and Bill Hansen. Pretty much the same. I think I'm going to go with a little bit diversity. So we take Raul Sanchez. That might give us a few votes from the Hispanics. Okay, awesome. Okay, so in addition to this, we start with one random exceptional White House resource card. And I've already drawn that. So this is this one here. We got an awesome Chief of Staff. Your White House Chief of Staff is amazing. Many long-time Washington insiders consider him the best ever. Because of your Chief of Staff's brilliance, efficiency, and influence, you receive the following benefits each turn. And number 1, immediately, if this card is drawn from Crisis deck during the game. So that's not the case right now. Place a cabinet effectiveness improving counter on your cabinet effectiveness track and receive 2 additional action points at the start of each turn. Once per turn, you may use this card to re-roll 1 die roll that is either a check against one of the game tracks or a roll on either the cabinet improvement or cabinet drama tables. Okay, cool. So usually you're supposed to place these cards here in these boxes, but that will even take more table space. So I decided to place them here, and yeah, okay. And there are usually tension markers in here, but I have them in the cup because that makes it easier for me to draw them randomly. So yeah, okay, that works fine with me. So the first thing I always talk about when I want to explain a game is how you win and how you lose. And this is already something which is not that easy to explain here. There's a ton of ways how to lose this game. And I'm going to explain them while I'm going over the board. Basically, how to win this game is you add up a lot of the values of all kinds of these tracks, mainly your domestic tracks, and then you subtract some of the stats in the foreign policy. And that gives you a certain victory point count. And you do this at the end of each year. So a turn represents a year in this game. So you do this at the end of each year, and that can trigger an auto victory if you're doing really good. Or if you played through 4 years, which is usually the standard game length, but you can also play through 8 years. So if you play through 4 or 8 years, you check one of these charts in here, and they then show you your achievement in comparison to some historical presidents. You can see, okay, I'm very good, like about Abraham Lincoln, or I'm kind of a loser. I don't know who is one of the worst, but this is then, or that this can be seen in the chart. So you cannot really talk about winning or losing except if you do this auto win, but otherwise it's kind of a comparison. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to go here over the board. I want to really explain pretty much the different tracks here on the board, what they are used for, and that will give you already a good idea what this game is about and what it has to offer. So even before we start the playthrough, I think you get a good idea what's going on here. So the first thing I want to talk about is here the turn sequence, because this is basically your guide through the whole game here. And we have a huge flip book here. This is the turn sequence flip book. And when you do your first games, you really literally start here on one of the very early pages, page 1 or something, and then you flip through every single page. And you simply go through the whole book. You flip through this book, and when you're done, you did a turn, and then you start again. And that's basically what you do. You go through this book again and again and again. Now, if you are a little more experienced, you don't have to look up everything in this book, but instead you simply can use this as a reminder. And you start here on the left, begin turn, and then you move this thing down one space to the other, and then you go here again, and you move it down, and you start on top again, and you move it down, and so on, until you go here to the end of the turn. And then you have here your game turn track, you go to year 2, and you start again here. So that's basically how this works. And you can already see you have a lot of blue spaces here, here, here. And these spaces are mostly spaces where you can act. Then we have these kind of brown and grayish spaces here. And this is where you usually randomly determine some event that is then produced by the game to give you some trouble. Usually, not always, but most of these events are not good. A lot of the time you will simply draw from an event deck, and this is just the deck for the first year. So we have more decks here, one deck for every year. Then we have additional decks you might have to draw cards from. And we have about, I don't know, like 50 or 60 cards that have been randomly removed from the game. So there are tons of event cards in this game. So you got all these brown spaces that will basically generate some events for you. And then you got the blue spaces during which you can react to these events. You got here these two black spaces. And these are the spaces when your two big rivals, one of them Russia and one of them China, they will act. And then you got these green spaces here. And these are the spaces when your allies will act. You have, like the UK, for example, Canada, Israel, all over the world, you got your standard, you got your allies, and they are divided in 4 groups. And this is randomized down here, these 4 groups, and you simply go from left to right. And when the first guy acts, you draw the left card, and then you see which group of allies will act, and then the next one, and so on. And apart from the allies, there will also be one rogue state acting, or a certain number. So you got, for example, you got Iran and you got North Korea. They will also act during this during these green spaces. And there are also game-generated rogue state. Here we have a rogue state level 1. This represents Afghanistan, and they will also act during these phases. Yeah, so this is basically how the turn works. And now let's go here. This is our White House area, and we've already seen this. We got the attributes of the president, and down here we got our key cabinet officials. Over here we got the public legislation priorities, and they've been determined randomly at the start of the turn. And you can see here at the top there's social security, privacy legislation, energy independence. Then we got infrastructure upgrades and gun legislation. And there's much more over here in this cup. And this can change if there are specific events. For example, let's say there's a bridge collapse, then the infrastructure upgrade will go to the top of this of these priorities here. And we will do legislation during the game, and depending how they match with the public legislation priorities, we will then get approval points. And then we have here administration legislation priorities, and we have here the campaign promise, and this is healthcare reform. And then we have these 3 that we could that we were able to choose, and I basically chose the ones that match the public legislation priorities because yeah, that makes it easier for us. We can then, because we also get a bonus if we fulfill these, and you get a bonus when you fulfill these, so that is reasonable to kind of match them. But of course you could choose something else here, because the different legislations have also some effects other than making the public happy. And if you are eager for these effects, then it can be reasonable to make this your administration legislation priorities. Okay, now here we have the POTUS and cabinet focus. So we have different focus markers. I wonder where they are. Might be somewhere in here. There we are. And they also are priorities from 1 to 6. And we can simply choose where we want to place number 1, where we want to place number 2, and so on. Got improve relations with Congress, economy, homeland security, public press relations, address domestic crisis, and cabinet effectiveness. And we simply will then choose our priorities here, and at some point during the year there will be die rolls for these, there will be a check, and if something is high on our priority list, then this might be improved. So yeah, that's kind of and this might have a successful effect then. Then we got a couple of tables here, the cabinet drama table, the cabinet improvement table. These are the rules for cabinet focus and tensions. So you can also look this up in this turn sequence book, but it could be helpful to have this here. Down here, this is the cabinet effectiveness. From time to time, you have to do checks on this one. Here we have party relations, and that will determine how many friends we can have as a maximum in Congress, and also some other things. This is a scandal track. Now I'm going to be honest, I played this game quite a while, but there was never a scandal. I'm not sure why. Maybe they come through these cards, but I never had a scandal. Now let's go to the Congress area. This is here. So here we got a track for bipartisan cooperation, and this is basically important for legislation, this whole Congress part. And here we have the party control in Congress, and right now it is controlled by my party because I'm playing on easy level. If you're playing normal, it's a split control, and you can also play that the opposition party controls it. And obviously this is also something which will, if there are, I think, midterm elections have an impact on the control of Congress. Then we have here congressional friends, these white guys, and that was not the best. So the white counters are congressional friends, and the black counters are congressional opponents. And as you can see, some of them are radical. You can see that here, and some of them are moderate. And in general, it's better if there are moderate people in the Congress. Right now, the radicals, we have 5 guys there, and 3 of them are radical. That has a negative impact on the bipartisan cooperation. If there are more moderates than radicals, then this would start on a higher level. In addition, they got some media values and other values, and yeah, this will matter later in the game. These 3 areas here, they are all about the legislation process. So we got here different bills, and these are really larger social projects that we can try to bring through Congress. And well, all that stuff is basically simply stored here, and then we can choose which one we want to try to bring through Congress, and then it goes on this track here, and eventually it might go into the past legislation spaces. And yeah, so this is kind of a just different tracks to track the process of the legislation. Down here, these 5 tracks, these are different tracks about our domestic situation. So this is here, for example, the state of economy, homeland security, media relations, relations with Congress. And this is the United Nations, and it shows the world opinion of the US. And you can see most of them start kind of in the middle. The state of economy starts a little bit higher. Now let's go a little more to the left here, and this is now, we're now done with, no, and actually not. You know what? Let's go here first. We stay with the domestic policy. Down here, we have a long public approval track, which starts at the moment at 40%. Here we have our prestige, which is important for some checks. We start at 6. And we also have our action points, and they are tracked here on this marker. Legacy points, these are basically victory points, and they are also tracked here. Okay, so this is basically all about domestic politics, and now we go to the foreign politics. We have here conflict tracks, all these, and these are simply, well, your main world conflict areas like Israel, Iran. We have, I don't know, US, Iran, China, Japan. So these are things where it's always a little problematic. And you can see here on the left, this is the conflict status. And if it's at 5, you have a war, and the best is won. And this is the relative strength between the two enemies. And here it depends. You got this equal at some point. Here it's very low, for example. And then depending where this thing is, one of the two nations will be in a better shape. Now here you can already see in these red areas here, if we got a war between Russia and NATO, then we have an order loss. The same is between China and Japan down here. And here, this is North and South Korea, and Israel and Iran. There will be an order loss if North Korea has the nuclear weapons, and if Iran has nuclear weapons. Otherwise, as long as it's just a conventional war, we are okay. Now the nuclear missiles are up here, and this is where they are tracked, where the progress is tracked. So we got one track for Iran, and we got one track here for North Korea. And we want to try to keep this low. Here we got strategic capabilities, Air Force training tech, Ground Forces training tech. Really important is the cyber warfare, strategic recon, intel gathering. And we always track our capabilities and then also the Chinese and the Russian capabilities in this specific area. And in most, we are doing better on most tracks. We're not doing that great in cyber warfare, and also in space warfare. We are a little bit behind, and especially cyber warfare is important, so we want to try to get better there. Over here, we have a few units, US military assets. They are not in play right now, but they can enter play, or they will enter play, if we should bring some specific legislation through Congress. Okay, this is basically the world map. It's a bit stylized, but yeah, this is a map of the world. You can see different regions, and each of them has a couple of tracks. So we can go, for example, here to the Middle East. We got down here the regional crisis levels. We want to avoid to get into a major crisis. That's really bad. Right now this is already at 3, so we want to try to get the crisis down here, for example. This is one of our first goals. Then over here we got a few things tracked. We got the regional stability, which is really low, and then we got the regional alignment, and that is also not that great. Now with the alignment, you don't move this one space up or one space down, but you place a trending marker on this track. So for example, the first time you're instructed to bring this one space down, you place a trending US marker here, anti-US marker, and then when you're instructed again to do it, you remove the marker and move the thing down. On the other hand, if there would be a marker here, for example, and they tell you to move the thing up or to improve it, you can simply remove the marker instead. So the effects here take a little longer. It's basically you have to trigger this thing twice before it actually moves one space. In addition, we have down here, we have military forces of the US. You can see you got Special Ops, US Air Force, US Marine Corps, and an intelligence advisor. We have allies. Here, Israel is a very close ally. And then there is the Gulf states / Saudi Arabia, and they are only close at the moment. We have a rogue state with Iran, and then we got a civil war marker here, which represents Syria. We got 2 unstable state markers. We got a terror group level 2, some US military footprint. So if you're sitting in this area, that could have a negative effect. And we got a Russian influence there. In addition, these guys are allies, and also Iran. There are tensions markers here, which will affect how they act. Here we have an intelligence track, and if we want to fight terror groups, we will bring them here. From here we place them here on these different levels on the intelligence track, and eventually we can try to strike and, yeah, I don't know, do drone attacks or send a special operations squad there and yeah, try to hit the terror groups. You pretty much have this, these things everywhere on the board. There's a few exceptions though. We have Russia and China. These are not your standard world regions. You have here a track that shows the state of economy of these two. We have a track that shows the relations with the US. We have posture 1 or 2. In the easy game it starts, wait a minute, that is wrong. In the easy game it starts at 1. They have a tension marker also here. These guys have 2 tension markers. There are also multilateral sanctions on Russia here. And the Eurozone has also its own state of economy track. But apart from that, it's the same thing. It's regional crisis and disalignment and stability track. And then we have CONUS. And there you have a domestic crisis level. You also have troops here. You have lingering domestic issues here on the side. And if this goes here up, this will be an order loss too. And yeah, so this is this part of the map. We have here a track to track the Russian and Chinese influence. And if they have too much, that can also lead to a Russian or Chinese victory and therefore also to an order loss for our side. Note that the oceans are kind of represented here by these little dots, and we have carriers in some of these oceans. And finally, we have here, this is our war board. In the easy game, we start with no war. And, well, you will see we will place the attacker and the defender here in these 2, and we will track their strength. And then we'll see. I mean, we come to this later. If there should be more than 5 wars on the board, we won't be able to track them anymore, and we will have an order loss. Down here, this is basically just kind of a storage area. I could have also taken a counter tray. We have terror groups, level 1, backside is level 2, and we have level 3 and then level 4. And if a terror group gets stronger after level 4, that will make them a rogue state, and this also goes to level 4. And if there is a level 4 rogue state at the end of a turn, then the game also ends, if I'm not wrong about that. If we ever run out of rogue state markers, the game will also end. Civil war markers. On the backside we have the unstable state. Civil war ceasefire markers. These are sanction markers, multilateral, unilateral, UN sanctions. And here I simply store my administrative priorities. I mean, this is just this. I'm not even sure if this is the way it should have been done, but I just placed it like that. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to store my tension markers down here. Instead, I'm going to place this card here. Now, the last thing we do for the setup, we have to draw the start, the cascading events. And we have to draw 2 of them for an easier game, and if I'm not mistaken, this is this deck. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's see what our first problem is. North Korean naval provocations threaten Republic of Korea. So the way these cards work is that at the start, the first time you draw this card, you have to deal with this first thing here. If this card shows up again, which might happen, we have to deal with this one here, and it might even show up a third time, and then sometimes there's a different effect. In this situation here, you see, okay, it's the same effect, maybe a little bit different, we'll see. So let's see what it says. North Korean gunboats harass shipping North Korean subs to sea. What? +1 regional crisis in Asia Pacific. Okay, so that's what we got to do. We can ignore a couple of things. Place tension on cabinet focus, that's what we can ignore. We can ignore the public approval results, and we can ignore instructions to spend action points. These things we can ignore with the cascading events that we draw at the start of the game. So that means the regional crisis goes up one space here in Asia Pacific. And now we draw tension counters. So we randomly draw them. And we got to draw how many? It says 2 each in North Korea and the Republic of Korea. Okay. So there's also 1 in each of them at the start of the game. Okay. So that's not that great. Increase the conflict track of these 2x1 box. So we can see here we have the conflict track. So this goes up from 2 to 3. And let's have a quick look what happens later. If the Republic of Korea-US ally relations are very close, and the conflict track is 2 or greater, which would be the case right now, they force the subs to surface at trending pro-US counters to Asia Pacific, +1 regional crisis, and we got to roll for a die. We got to roll a die, and then we'll see what happens. And if they are not very close and the conflict track is, well, let's see. Okay, so we definitely want to avoid this. So that means we have to make sure that the relations remain very close, and the conflict track should be at 2 or greater. Now, yeah, that's a little odd. So we don't necessarily want to bring this too much down, which is strange. Okay, so maybe 2. If we could bring this to 2 again, it would be really good. But if it's at 3, it's not that terrible. We just have to make sure that the relations remain close, I guess. Now this card goes onto this 2 deck here, and there are chits, and some of these chits will instruct us to draw a card from the 2 deck, and then this card will be triggered a second time. Okay, now let's draw the second event here. And this is cyber theft of sensitive intelligence, government information threatens national security. So we got a +1 on domestic crisis at a -2 of public approval. Now we can ignore the public approval, but the domestic crisis goes up 1 space. This isn't good at all. We're close for a domestic failure already, so we really got to do something there. Oh, interesting. We might actually see a scandal right away. Now I know how this works. Okay. So roll a die and we'll see what happens. Oh, first we got to do -2 public approval. No, we don't have to do that exactly. So let's see. That's a 2. So that means scandal in DOD. What does DOD mean? I got no clue. Place a new scandal. Department of Defense, I guess. Place a new scandal for the Secretary of Defense. Now this is interesting because, as I mentioned, I've never done that before. So I gotta check how that works. So we have here our scandal for the Secretary of Defense, and there are these legislative segments here, and this is also the scandal phase. And you get a roll on a scandal table to see how the whole thing continues. And you get modifiers there. Basically what we want is we want a good bipartisan cooperation, good relations with Congress, and good party relations. If we have that, it will give us good modifiers, and then we can we might get out of this situation in a good way. I don't know. I've never done it before, but I think that makes sense. So we want to work on these relations with Congress, basically. In addition, this card says that the cyber strategic capability is less than the cyber capability of Russia or China, +1 domestic crisis, -2 public approval, and also -1 relations with Congress. And the same happens with the third thing. I mean, it's not the same, but this is also about cyber strategic capability. So therefore, we also have to make sure that we improve our cyber warfare capabilities. Okay. So we place this thing there, and I guess we're now done with the setup. So I guess I'm gonna load this up here. We can start then gameplay in the new video. Now I gotta say right away, I think this is one of the most fascinating pure solitaire games that I've ever played, but I'm also not absolutely sure how much enjoyment I actually get out of it. I played it now once, not completely through. At some point I simply stopped. It went on for a long time. I think I played about 15 hours, and I just made it through 2 years. But I have to say, the first time you play it, you know, it's really slow, and I then realized after a while things are speeding up actually quite a bit. But still, you know, this is, I'm not totally sure how much I actually really love this game. So I think what I'm going to do is now, I'm going to approach this with the goal to play over 2 years to the midterm elections. If I really should be totally hooked, I'm going to play to the very end of the term, over the full 4 years. But I guess I'm going to stop after 2 years. So that should give you a good idea how the game plays out. And but it won't drag on for too long. Okay, so yeah, if you enjoyed this, you might consider supporting the channel on Patreon. Hope to see you on the next video. Bye.